Finance and Facility Committee for the School District of Waukesha. First thing on the agenda is verification the meeting is properly posted. Mr. Clark.
Yes, it is.
That's wonderful. Now we have opportunities for citizens to speak and correspond. Is there any citizens that would like to speak to us tonight? Feel free. There's no rush. Okay. No citizens. First action item, approval of minutes from the January meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Motion by Mr. McCaffrey, second by Ms. Voigt. Discussion? No discussion, amendments to the minutes? Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Minutes are approved. Approval of monthly vouchers.
There were no voucher questions this month.
Does anyone currently have questions on the monthly vouchers? Can I have a motion for approval of monthly vouchers?
So moved.
I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Oh, good, I'd hate to have it go without a second. We have a motion from Mr. McCaffrey for approval and a second by Ms. Reinacek. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes 5-0. Item number C, approval of the Oakdale property and county TT land lease. Mr. Clark.
Yeah, historically, the district has leased out these properties to local farmers and has gone through a bid process. And we followed that lead, and we have the results for Oakdale and Highway TT. One thing unique, obviously, with Highway TT compared to the past is they're building a bypass through the middle of it. So we've let every bidder know that we are not going to spend the next year trying to guarantee them access, that they understand that the DOT is in charge of that. So, and then the respondents obviously were fine with that. So attached to your packet is, it's two separate leases. I have maps, I have the bid results. The document, obviously, besides dates and numbers, reflecting the bid results, really hasn't changed at all. If the board or the committee is interested, we can go ahead and approve these and continue to lease out these properties.
Questions, comments? Ms. Reinacek.
So they're completely fine knowing that some of the land is now unusable because of the road, and they're going to find a way around to get there themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same cost.
Well, they created the price. Their submittal, I'm assuming, takes into account the knowledge of the bypass construction.
So this 16,335 was what it was this year, and it's going to continue at 16,335?
I don't know what the number was. Actually, we had no one out there this year because we were so uncertain with the bypass. But this is what they submitted for what they were willing to pay us. We didn't set this, and we didn't create the market.
Okay.
Is the winning bidder the previous person who worked the land?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I think it's changed.
Okay.
Mr. Como?
This is a blind bid process, right? They just submit their bids and.
Yeah, we send out a letter that says there's so many, our estimate of tillable acres is this. Let us know what you would pay us.
Have we ever run into any issues with anyone using land for farming?
Not that I'm aware of, actually.
No injuries, no?
No.
any of that?
Also, sometimes we get complaints about weeds in those fields, like this year when we didn't. That's one of the benefits we get is the field is turned over, and but no, I've not ever heard of any issues with the leasing of these properties.
Do I have a motion for approval?
I approve I make a motion that we accept the bid for the top bidder in each of the lease arrangements that were listed here.
Ms. Voigt, motions? Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, additional discussion. Ms. Reinacek, second. More questions on the? Okay. All in favor of lease approval, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Action item D, approval of adult day services lease.
Yeah, going back a couple of years, the district agreed to a lease, and that was in August of 16, to lease out part of White Rock campus to adult day services who provide adult individuals with developmental or physical or behavioral disabilities. It's kind of a job training program, and Joe's here to probably provide a better description than I just did. So they've asked for, and the lease was coming due, but they've also asked for additional space, which we have at White Rock. There's a map at the back of your packet if you want to see the areas. The green areas is what they were currently leasing. We would be adding the blue, which are on the first floor of White Rock, and it would bring their total lease space to just over 6,800 square feet. So again, the nice thing is the documents there, we just had to update. I did adjust the rate, put an inflationary factor on the leased amount, and adjusted it from the previous. So it's the same document, but I can answer any questions you might have related to it.
Dwight?
It looks like all of the leased area is on the first floor.
Yes. Yep.
And my question would be, if it's a job-related type of, job preparation type of facility, will they be using the kitchen and the coffee shop like they do with the sale program?
He's shaking his head no.
No.
If you want to come up and answer, Joe, in case there's other questions.
I know that the kitchen and coffee shop had been used by the sale program, up to this point.
The space that they're using is primarily for leisure and classroom instruction type activities. The gymnasium is used if there's permission granted by the principal, if there's nobody in it from East or the WTA program. But this is solely in the space, the footprint that you see in that wing of the building. So it would not have any impact on WTA. It has had a positive impact in that it's allowed families to go from services upstairs to after-school opportunity, early evening opportunity downstairs.
Oh, it's like an extended.
It's a private contractor, but similar type services as to what WTA is providing.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, Joe, I just was wondering, when this was first presented to us, there was maybe some potential for ads to work closely with East High School, and didn't know if there was any sort of types of programs that were developed together, or any kind of outings together, anything like that? Or are they completely 100% separate?
They are separate. The only connection would be like I said before, a number of families have utilized this as an after-school. WTA lets out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So this has been an afternoon and early evening experience. And Adult Day Services did adjust their hours a little bit to help accommodate our students and families.
So what kind of interaction is there between the groups?
Outside of casual,
there isn't any?
There isn't, outside of any casual passing that may happen in a hallway, there is no formal program connection there.
Okay. And then the other big thing was, have there ever been any issues in the last 2.5 years that have occurred with this program being located here?
Nothing with the program located there. The only reason that emergency has ever been called to that building is if one of the clients of Adult Day has needed medical treatment for a seizure or something of that nature.
Okay. Okay, so the relationship has been good, is how you
has.
would characterize it. Okay, it's a good fit.
It's a very good fit.
Okay.
Ms. Dwight?
It mentions in the second paragraph the idea of some upgrades that are being needed, and that they would be responsible to, take care of those. What types of upgrades are they looking at?
Mainly the bathrooms. The rooms they're renting are kindergarten rooms, so they have very low.
Toilets.
Toilets
Equipment?
and sinks, yes. So upgrading the bathrooms to accommodate adult-size individuals.
I think there's one. where they might-
Changing area.
Yeah, changing or a shower or something that, but they would be on the.
I was thinking it was where the early childhood program had been. So that's why I was
Yep.
wondering if
Right,
that
yeah.
was the kind of upgrades they needed to make. Okay.
And they're all things that we can convert back to
Right.
went back to a kindergarten or 4K room or whatever. It's easy for us to go back.
Any additional questions?
It looks like it's effective immediately then, if we would approve it? Okay. That they to make the transition and get ready to use the space?
Do I have a motion?
So moved?
Check for approval?
Second it.
Second by Ms. Voigt. Additional discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. Okay, item E might take some time. Okay. So item E is the discontinuance of the sports facility usage agreement. The purpose of this is to set a timeline for finalizing renegotiation of the contract. We met with them. I didn't put this on closed session because we're not going to be, there's nothing we were talking about here that would relate to bargaining strategy or anything like that. Plus, I think it's best for it to be out in the open for all people involved. We met with them in December, went over the things that the board, this committee was interested in terms of revising the agreement, trying to make sure we preserve the sports facility usage relative to the fields and clarify the status of the organization versus nonprofit versus for-profit. There was nothing in that agreement that was different than what this committee's talked about. And we prepared that agreement really ready to go out January 10th. And there are some delays in being able to contact the other party, and he just received it last week. So he hasn't really had time, or they really haven't had time to get back to us with their comments. But we wanted to make sure that we set a time frame that would be after the next F&F meeting. So if this should get approval tonight, if any member of the committee wants it back on the agenda at the next F&F meeting for, if we don't come to an agreement or for whatever reason, I'll be glad to put it on the agenda next time, should we need an extension or something like that. But the purpose of this motion tonight is to be clear about our expectations for settling the situation. And it's being proposed as being settled per what we discussed here at the committee. So you're not approving what we proposed, you're just saying, if we don't have a settlement, then we're prepared to move on. It's moving on after the next F&F meeting. Any questions? Mr. Gray was in, if you guys have any questions, Mr. Gray was involved too. Questions?
Line of March 15th, so I guess is something will be worked out in that time, but it's on.
It's on. Must not be speaking into it.
Maybe they cut me off. That'd be a good thing. My anticipation is things will hopefully be worked out that works for everyone. In that particular case, then this will be a moot point, but it is a starting point to get some things done on this that we've been trying to work through.
And we've been trying to work through this in a non-accusatory fashion. Nobody's at fault here. We're just trying to clean up things, make it proper relative to the way the contract reads. The MOU would be wiped out in our proposal, as we discussed. It's just contractually stated that it's wiped out. And so everything it cleans up everything, should they agree to it. They might come back with a counter proposal, and we'll try to work something out if that's the case. Mr. Como.
A couple suggestions. One, I think the official name of this committee is Finance and Facilities Committee, not the Facilities and Finance, so I would change it to the proper name. And then just looking at the signatories, just wondering if there needs to be any more signatures on this.
This is what our attorney advised.
Okay.
This is direct from.
We can amend like a title or that Mr. Como? I don't have it in front of me.
It's on the back of the executive summary.
Yep, flip it.
2E.
No, it's just a one-page thing. Are we right here?
Is that it? Thank you.
Welcome.
What would I do without you, Mr.
Trying to
Mayor?
help. I know.
If that's what our attorneys recommended, that's fine. I just was asking the question. I'm okay with that.
Well, we can make it finance and facilities, but.
It's referenced
yeah,
3 times.
right.
There.
Well, what will be communicated back to them, that the formal resolution of the committee and the vote that's been taken, if this passes. So just the fact that I sign it really doesn't make it powerful. It's the
No?
action of the committee that, I'm just signing it as we send it off, that's all. It's the action of the committee that empowers it.
I was mainly, the question that I was asking about the signatures was, we had an administration signature on the MOU, so I didn't know if,
Well, this is a resolution of the
We
committee.
needed an administrative
This is a resolution of the
and-
committee, so it should just be probably the committee chair, and, but it is the committee that's making this, not the
Okay. I'm fine with that. I'm okay with that.
Does it get voted on at the full board?
No,
Just here?
just here.
Okay. And that's why you're signing it?
But it means nothing without you guys passing it.
Right, no,
So-
I understand.
I can
You're just not
sign
gonna
this, but
sign
if-
it and not
if this
tell us?
doesn't get voted, yeah, it doesn't matter, you know?
Okay, so I'll make sure.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, I'm fine with the resolution. I think March 15th, from what I understand, is you're going to shoot for that, and that seems to be enough time, reasonable enough time. If we need to extend it, we can, bring that back here if necessary, but I will move approval of the resolution with the amendments discussed.
I
Second.
second.
Mr. Caffrey beat you to the punch, so motion by Mr. Como, second by Mr. McCaffrey. Any other questions? Discussion?
I think this represents what we went over, very succinct, and I think we need to keep this moving forward, so.
I can only say that there's plenty of time for them to, with what minor changes we made in the agreement, they're very simple, very clear. They were clearly communicated in December. It's not like there was any surprises when this was sent to the other parties. So there's really no reason we shouldn't be able to get this completed before the next F&F meeting, but if there's a problem, any committee member can contact me and I'll be sure to put it on the agenda.
But they received notice on January 10th, you said,
No, they received the actual formal document just last week,
just last week. Okay.
but they were told in December that we were going
was
to,
coming.
that we would be sending them a document. And it is as per our discussions. Check.
Diane said that there's 3, but then there's also the title, if you're
Yeah, I
going to
got the
change it.
title.
And the title,
yeah.
yep.
Finance and facilities. I'll do a search on it, get them all cleaned up. Any other comments, questions? Okay, nothing else, go to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. I gotta go back to finding our agenda. I know. No, when I'm in a rush. We're done with the action items. Now we're off to the information items. Monthly budget update.
In an effort to keep this short, since we have a big agenda, everything is looking in line where we expect it to be from both expenses and revenues. From a revenue perspective, we started getting our first property tax payments. We completely settled the capital projects levy, so that's fully in, and we received $38.9 million in our general fund taxes in January. We'll be getting another tax settlement next week. Other than that, there's nothing that is remarkable that stands out. Everything's in line with where we expect it to be, and percentages are right in there with where they were last year. So we have no surprises or anything to share with you this month. Any questions?
Ms. Voigt?
under the insurance and judgments, it was because of that quarterly insurance bill payment in January that has it look like we're at 85% of the budget.
There was, with this year's insurance, with switching gears a little bit, we paid 1 quarter from last year into this fiscal year, so it looks like we're over and ahead, but then the last quarter of this year will end up in next fiscal year, so it'll even out at the end of the year. It's a timing thing and how the bills are being paid now. So we're not over on that, we're just have one cycle ahead from last year, if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's the cycle of payment.
Mr. Como?
It's been a while since we've seen the health claims payable.
Oh,
Do you
you're right,
mind,
I did add that this
Yeah,
month.
do you mind just kind of taking us through how it's broken down and
Certainly.
where we stand?
Certainly. So I believe that's probably the last page, yes. Your last page of the document. And this has everything from July through January. The upper half of the report shows the revenues or the credits to the plan. And that's basically anything that we pull out of payroll. Employer contributions and employee contributions get credited to, this is a liability account that houses all the ins and outs for the insurance. And what we want to do is keep the running balance close to, when you look at the beginning balance in July, it's 1.3 million. And that's the money that we had to have coming into this year to pay any claims that were expected to still be rolling over from the year before. Beneco, our advisors, helped provide that number looking at the rolling claims history. And so we want to, our goal is to stay fairly close to that number as we go through, expecting that our IBNR is fairly similar every year. So the top half is all of our credits, money that's coming in to help support the program. And then on the expenditure side, it's the money that we're paying out to provide this program. And that includes claims, so where it says insurance claims, those are our insurance draws, those are the UHC health claim draws to pay the claim bills. And then Navitus is all the pharmacy bills that we get. And then down below are some miscellaneous things, admin, the cost of the stop-loss insurance, flu vaccines, the cost of the clinic. And so if you look at the very end of January, our ending balance is 1.49 million, so we're actually sitting very good right now. Now, claims are a very hard to predict thing. And fortunately, right, last year we had a lot of very high-cost claims. Right now, those are settling down. Things are getting a little back to normal, and we hope that it stays that way. But right now, we're sitting very good with our position. It does vary so much from month to month, though. As you can see when you look through this chart, you can see some months didn't look quite as good as the ending balance went. But now we're playing catch-up, and those higher cost claims are rolling off. We've gotten our stop-loss payments to help offset those costs.
Como?
What drives the stop-loss premium? It looks like it varies. I guess I would expect a premium would be set for a certain period of time.
That's a
For a
very good
contract.
question. That's something I'll have to look into unless Darren knows the answer to that, but I can.
No.
Yeah, let me look into that. You know, at one point we changed companies, but that wouldn't have affected the October to November difference, so.
We'll mark that question down. I don't know if you remember this or not, but we have Beneco, our consultant, scheduled for next month to kind of go over kind of a status of our health program, health insurance program, and we can bring that answer.
Jeff's coming in? Okay.
Yep.
I think Mr. Como brings up a good point. I mean, there's a stunning increase in the stop-loss premium.
Last year's high-cost claims did not help us in securing a flat premium for stop-loss this year. We marketed, and then it was a tough year in that realm. But we're doing much better this year in terms of the high-cost claims so far.
So far, and we hope for our employees' sakes that we don't see them.
Como?
And just one other thing that might be nice to show on here is our reserve.
Oh.
Just so that we know where that's at, easy to pick it out, so we don't have to go digging for it. Appreciate that.
Okay, I'll add that for next
Thanks for
month.
bringing it back.
Not a problem. Other questions?
Well, I do see a stop loss of reimbursements would give us an idea of, that reimbursement number is what gets engaged when we have high claims, is that the?
Claims over $300,000, they pay the difference on. And to date, so far this fiscal year, we have gotten over $600,000 back in stop loss, and we do anticipate some more rebates coming based on the claims when they finished up.
So, going back to looking at the stop loss rates versus the claims, I can see where they, the delta is 223 versus 620. So we're paying 223, but we got 620 coverage so far. See why they're trying to make up the difference.
Yeah, the reimbursements from your stop-loss carrier are always great in the year you get the reimbursement, but there's a payback period, yes, so.
No insurance company actually loses money.
That's correct.
Been in business long. Yeah,
The actuaries earn their money.
but there's not as much entertainment value to
No, there's
insurance.
not. Food's not as good either.
Additional questions? Those are really good questions, and that's a nice, nice summary provided with great graphical information. And anybody wants to see, have our budget update in case they have trouble sleeping at night, they can always ask for a copy from our business office.
It's this sheet that stops Sherry and I from sleeping at night.
I'm always knocking on Darren's door at the end of the month. Darren,
Now,
this
if you
month I
want to,
had good news, though.
okay,
Yeah.
so we're going to go from this really exciting topic of monthly budget update to our long-range budget forecast.
Yeah, the last month we went over some key assumptions that were going to be utilized in terms of creating this long-range forecast, which we do every year at this time. And again, obviously, being in a state biennial budget cycle this year makes, or heading into next year, makes it a little more difficult to project out, but we make some set of assumptions. So I didn't go, knowing the agenda was long, I didn't provide a ton of detail. We could come back with more information if you'd like to see it. But some of the key assumptions we talked about last year was about a 1% loss in resident enrollment, which is about 120 kids or so. We talked about we think there's some belief that there's going to be additional funding for public education. It's a belief system, so you can have it be whatever you want. But other things like open enrollment, we just assume flat because, quite honestly, how do you project open enrollment? And then we got into health insurance. We're looking at a 10 to 12% trend on that still. We'll talk about that next month when Beneco's here as well. Employee compensation, you have CPI increasing, which is part of the teacher calculation. We don't have to go to CPI, but it is part of the conversation. But you also just have upward pressure on salaries because the job market is just so tight now in every area of our operation. We're not unique in that way. There's a lot of that out there. So with all that said, and again, this long-range budget forecast is not detail-oriented heading. It's really kind of a trend analysis of what we're looking at. And to kind of summarize where we're at, as long as we continue with 1%, loss of resident enrollment every year, we're going to struggle financially, in my mind, unless something significantly changes on the state level. So I went through and I created a box at the bottom of the executive summary, and on the back is the years out. Keep in mind when you look at the years out and what those deficits are, it's assuming we don't do anything to balance the budget the year prior. So don't leave here thinking, the sky is completely falling. That's not the case. So at the bottom, and as you hear state funding conversations, you're going to hear a lot about either per pupil aid or revenue limit authority, but it's going to be $1 of revenue per student. And last year we got $204, I think it was, So we're budgeting a $200 increase heading into next year, assuming that what we're hearing, some of that's true, that there is going to be some additional funding. So we're throwing that out there. We'll develop a contingency plan if it comes in less than that. At that point, it'll probably come out of strictly non-personnel because we've hired the people. By the time, if split leadership in Madison holds true, we probably won't have a state budget until September, late August, but maybe not. Maybe they pull it all together quickly. But the box at the bottom takes into account, the first line is a per pupil increase of $200, which generates just under $2.5 million for us. But because of our loss in resident enrollment, we're going to lose $655,000 of revenue limit authority if nothing changes. So you have to back that off to get to the net increase in revenue. Then we have health insurance, where we think health and dental, we think that's about, if you want to talk about it on a per pupil basis, is about $142 per pupil. CPI, past practice salary adjustments is $227 per pupil, meaning steps, lanes, movement across whatever salary schedule they're on. A lot of our non-personnel line items do adjust. We don't have a lot of control over them. Utilities would be a perfect thing. Special ed tuition, which is tied to someone else's employee compensation costs. There's an inflationary factor there as well. So we end up in a position, even with starting with a positive $200 per pupil, with a negative $275 position, or a budget deficit of about $3.4 million. Now, we're already acting administratively, just like we did last year, to address this. We'll continue to monitor what we're hearing from Madison, but again, I don't want you thinking this is an ultra-conservative projection. We're starting off with, we need to get $200 of additional revenue from the state, so I think it's a pretty moderate position to take on this. The overall trend, as I mentioned before, again, as long as our resident enrollment continues to slide, and I do think we'll hit if history tells you anything, we'll hit a bottom point and then it swings up. But we're just not there yet. So health insurance and staffing costs on the expense side, and on the revenue side, it's pupil count.
Como?
Is CPI an exact number right now? Do you have that? I thought that comes out in January.
2.48%, I believe it was.
And that's what you have in here right now?
Yeah.
Okay. And I know you said that you're going to, conversations from last year have continued. When do you guys get real serious if we're looking at $3.4 million? Months out?
What
or?
time's cabinet tomorrow morning? 8:30 tomorrow morning. I mean, we've been talking about it. We kept a laundry list or a study list from last year, so we have a foundation to start these conversations from. We'll probably be talking next month with Beneco here about some potential health insurance savings that the board might want to consider. Some of it we'll save just through attrition. I mean, we're serving fewer resident kids. There's some natural savings in that, you would hope. But everything else that's out there, eventually it comes down to a service, level of service, and the number of services. Whether that's right or wrong, but we're a service industry, so that's just the way it works.
I know those are difficult discussions, and I am happy that those discussions are taking place at the administrative level, as opposed to how we used to deal with those 10 or 15 years ago. That wasn't, I don't think that was the right way to handle things, so. But keep us informed as you guys, are meeting on that.
Yeah, we plan to go through a very similar process as we did last year. It's all the cabinet's the same team, so we know exactly the process we went through, and I think we met. There's never a perfect solution, but I think we did a pretty good job last year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the forecast? I don't get too worried about projecting out tax levy, and because who knows what state aid's going to be 3 years from now. I'd truly be a shot in the dark. But as long as our revenue limit authority continues to decline, more than likely we're not going to have a tax issue because the board has less taxing authority under that. scenario. So, so that's where we're at.
Okay. I don't think there's any additional questions. We'll move on to the Express Swim information.
And this is pretty much just a follow-up. As you know, the express agreement that we currently have is coming due. I think it's at the end of summer, if I remember the specific date. But last month, the committee asked for some comparison information because of either a new pool being built or one that was been built, certainly since the last lease. So I asked Blaine Carlson to do, in his opinion, and I can't think of a better person to ask about facilities than him. So he went through the area ones and wrote down his pros and cons. I had no input on any of this. This is strictly his opinion. So I still think we have, if not the best pool in the area, we're certainly a top-tier facility. And for a facility that's 15 years old, roughly, I think we're in a good place. The facility needs work. I mean, it is 15 years, and pools age faster than most other areas of your facilities. I still think we have a pretty unique site. I also included I had Jess in my office go through and just cut out the pieces of the rent that they paid, the previous agreements. So that's just, the first one on page 5 is the 04 through 14, and it shows those payments. And then the next one is 14 through 16, or 17. It shows those, so you can see the history of the payment structure. And then also just a list of the payments more in an Excel format, so it's easier for you to see. So I'm hoping next month to come back with a proposal, either something we've mutually talked about, us and Express Swim, or maybe it's an idea that I think it's a starting point and we can talk about it for me to submit it to Express. I'm open to either approach to that. But I do think building maintenance is something we really need to think about and map out for if you want to keep South the top tier, and even West needs some work. I think we need to focus on that.
Mr. Como?
Yeah, I appreciate the work that Blaine put into this. I mean, we could quickly compare other pools in the area. The conclusion I think that you walk away with is the way, we built our pool. It was built for competition. And to be able to host the WIA state meet and other large
Invitationals,
yeah.
right?
I mean, just from a capacity perspective, 2,000 spectators versus, I think 800 was the next largest. Being able to warm up. I mean, they're saying they don't have warm-up facilities at some of the pools. So those things that really seem pretty basic kind of things, we took into consideration. Do you know what the total amount is in the sinking fund right now? I didn't see a total on there.
I think at the start of the fiscal year was like 79,000 or 75,000. Some
Okay.
expenses have come out of there already. I budgeted for us the authority to spend all those dollars. It doesn't look like we're going to do that, but just so we'd have it, because there's a lot of work at the South Pool to get it up to where it should be.
Yeah, as we come closer towards, we're working out the new contract, it'd be nice to see, what the ins and outs of that sinking fund look like. See what we have spent the money on and where we're at, what kind of money do we have left. And the sinking fund was never designed to cover all of our expenses, but, as much as we could possibly cover. And I think we need to maintain these pools. This is a fantastic site, and not just south, but west. So do you think there are any improvements at north also that we need to do?
I know there is, but I can't think of what. Tim was just in my office the other day telling me about some sizable equipment that needs to be, I think it was the filtration system that needs to be upgraded.
So is your plan to lump them all together, so we're talking about pools in general, or do you want to take them one at a time? Or?
That's our hope. Tim started with South just because we knew the express agreement was coming forward, but kind of developing a 8 to 10 year plan of likely maintenance needs. And we're branching that out. I know he's in the process of adding West, and we just haven't gotten to North yet, but I know for a fact, I believe it was the filtration system is to that point where we need to do something with it, so.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Voigt?
I have two questions, or a question and a comment. Knowing that this is a facility that lends itself to having major meets at South, is there any revenue that comes in from those kinds of experiences that can help to offset some of the improvements that need to be made?
Just through the payments through the lease.
Okay, so that's basically Express gets that money from
I'm
the
sure,
competitions that are being housed there, and that's part of what helps to pay their rent.
and I think Express probably does some things that we don't generally, like fixing the scoreboards and things like that. I think they do some of that, under Tim's guidance, but, so not everything, but the bulk of it, any financial payment to us is strictly through the lease.
There isn't a factor for revenue that would be coming in through other events, okay? My second comment would be, as you're renegotiating, I think it's really good to have number 14 included, the scholarships for 6 annual hardship scholarships allowing participants to swim totally free, especially as we're looking to be able to make our, sports as accessible to as many kids as possible. It's good to see that's built into the process.
You know, one of the things is it concerns me about a contract, the scholarships in particular. Just because it's in the contract doesn't mean those scholarships actually get advertised and awarded. So I'd like to have what is the history of them providing contracts,
Good point.
scholarships over the period of time that this contract has been in agreement.
Okay.
I think it'd be a nice thing to know that they actually are able to provide scholarships to children in our district and have been providing those scholarships.
I actually think that was their idea, and they started that a long time ago. Not that we shouldn't get the information, I'm just saying I think it's been a long tradition of that group.
It was also pushed by, board members at the time, I recall, but it was probably also their idea, yes. The other thing is our pools get used by, a lot of our programs are joint programs with Catholic Memorial, Kettle Moraine,
Oh, the
McWanago.
co-ops, yeah.
They should be helping on the maintenance. What fees do we collect from any of those schools, if anything? And since the meets get held, I'm sure most of our meets get held at South, that will probably receive more maintenance dollars, shared maintenance dollars from the other programs as well. So it's not just maintaining them north and west, it's also the contribution of maintaining the South Pool, which is the common competition pool. I'd also say, our taxpayers paid for this pool once. I don't feel that we should ever ask the taxpayers to pay for it twice. And so maintenance dollars for this pool has to come from the program and from the district, not from our taxpayers. All dollars that the district spends does come from our taxpayers, but I don't feel comfortable going to any sort of special request for dollars for this pool. We're very happy, as far as I can tell, with Express, and especially
Yeah, well, yeah.
the Carlsons. I've seen them step up when we've needed coaches, and they run a very nice program, and it's very much something to be proud of, what we've been able to accomplish at South High with that pool. But I do think when they talk about stuff that needs upkeep, I think our community, with making that investment that we decided to make as a board at the time, the community didn't decide it, but we decided as a board, I think our community would definitely expect us to make sure we keep it up, maintain a facility that we've put that many taxpayers' dollars into already. So when they highlight things that need to be addressed, I think we should go ahead and address them. But I would like to have them assist as they can with, raising money, and also the other districts that use other schools that use our facilities, Catholic Memorial, Kettle Moraine, McWanago, to step up as well. We're not asking a lot. It's nice that they have access to our pools, and we're nice that we're able to provide it, but kick in a little bit, it'd be nice. Any other comments? Wait.
Is this pool still used by the community as much as it was originally marketed to be, like a pool that, retirees could come and swim in and things like that? Or is that not as much as they had originally talked it up when they were trying to get it?
I know there's some lap swimmers. I don't have a count, though. I don't think it's a lot of a lot of people, but that could change year to year naturally too. So that's maybe a question we could ask the Carlsons when they come in too. At some point, I'm assuming they'll be at a meeting like this. So, but there is some level of community usage.
When we were using the community service fund, we insisted that there be community access to the pool. It's a little hard to get that done, and you have to supply hours, and the hours aren't convenient. But
Yeah.
so I don't think it got the use that we were hoping it would get. But it is a clear intention for the facility to be available to the community.
And as long as we're analyzing it, just to know what level of participation there has been.
Well, thank the Carlsons for providing all this information, and let them know that we want to keep the pool in good shape. We're
not pulling the plug?
We want to have a good reputation with the pool, yeah. Off to discussion items, if there's no further questions on Express. Okay, discussion items is referendum financing plan. I think we have a 10 to 15 minute overall allocation of time for this. Okay.
Starts when I start talking.
Fire went into park.
You got to turn on you're off yet.
That's on.
Is it on? Can you hear?
I'm connected
He's got
in a
you.
sec.
He's got you. Yeah, he's got you.
Turn the other one on too, Michelle. You need two.
He said he heard her.
Yeah, you can, get surround sound going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Does the clicker work? I don't know if it's on either.
it does work.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
Good
on high
evening.
definition television with the, yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's where I do some of my best work. Good evening, everyone. You should have what's up on the screen also in front of you as a handout. I know there were a couple things in your packet, but our main objective tonight is just to give you an update in terms of how the referendum may be financed. So we're going to talk tonight a little bit about where interest rates are, and then we're going to talk about an overall financing strategy, how we may fund the overall $60 million, as well as how we may phase it over the next year or so, phase in the borrowing. So that's our objective, and to accomplish that in 12 minutes, let's jump right in. This first slide is just an illustration of where the interest rate environment is. So this is just a proxy for the overall market. It's the Bond Buyer 20 Bond Index. So it's more of a proxy for a 20-year financing. You're doing a 10-year financing. But think of it as just giving you an idea of where the overall trend in interest rates it has been. And so this is a 20-year history of that index that we're looking at on the left-hand side. That red box is around just where that index has been over the past 12 months. And then we explode that over on the right-hand side to give you a sense of, and we change the scale there, so don't let the steepness of that scare you. But to really just give you a feel for how much interest rates have changed over the past 12-month period, increasing fairly sharply. However, we have had a recent decrease in rates. I mean, we've heard, the Federal Reserve potentially slowing down their pace of increasing interest rates. They're increasing short-term interest rates, but they're reading those macroeconomic variables when they're making that decision. And those macroeconomic variables are kind of telling them that perhaps economic growth is slowing down, not only in the United States, but on a global basis. Some concern over tariffs and what that impact will have on the economy. And anytime you hear that kind of bad news, it is bad news, but it tends to be good news for interest rates. So we are really comfortable with where the market is and feel good about going into the long-term financing for the referendum. So this is not the version that you have in front of you. I sent a revised version late this afternoon, but the chart that you should have in your handout, and you also, I think, had in your packet.
Yeah, the one you have in the packet is the one that we actually use for our information campaign going into the referendum, just to provide you that benchmark of what was talked about and promised in theory.
And what was talked about? It was the fact that the chart you're looking at, and I apologize, it's not up on the screen, but the chart you're looking at shows where the current total tax rate is, that, or at least it was going into the referendum, and the fact that the 72 cents is on top of the operating mill rate. We talked a lot pre-referendum about this idea of we don't know where the operating mill rate will go in the future, Darren just alluded to that when he was talking about the projection model. If you have declining enrollment, you could have shrinking revenue, and you could have a shrinking levy because of that, based on the revenue limit formula. And if that's the case, we're going to have a certain amount of scheduled debt service that you have to pay that will make the referendum tax impact that was discussed of 72 cents, but we also want to have this concept of a piece of the referendum financing plan that you can prepay. So if you see that operating mill rate going down over time, you could potentially levy additional dollars above what is scheduled in debt service and start prepaying debt. So we wanted to look at an option where we have a two-part financing plan. If we issue traditional, and that gets to our next slide, if we issue traditional general obligation promissory notes, those are not going to be prepayable at any time. So those are not like your mortgage where you can refinance it whenever you'd like, as many times as you'd like. On a municipal bond market issue, what we'd find is that likely the first 7 years are going to be non-callable. So that's what we have illustrated here. The first 7 years of that issue are non-callable. The last 3 maturities, and this would be the issue on the left-hand side, the $45 million, would be callable. So what happens if you end up in a situation in 2020 or 2021 or 2020, whenever in the future, over the life of that debt issue, that your mill rate is dropping and you say, what if we put a few extra cents on it to start prepaying our debt? Well, it's not prepayable for 7 years. So we wanted to have this piece that is prepayable at any time. So we've broken the referendum financing into those two parts: a $45 million general obligation promissory note issue that would be issued as a traditional municipal market issue, and then a bank loan for the remainder, which is $15 million. And that bank loan would be prepayable at any time. So we've already gotten a feel for where those rates are. You can see as you look at the municipal market issue for $45 million, the estimated AIC, or all-inclusive rate, is 2.55%. The estimated AIC on the bank loan is 2.71%. So we're paying for that prepayment flexibility. Having that means a little bit higher interest rate. When we got the interest rates from the bank, the prospective bank, or where that market is in general versus where the municipal market is, we found that the least amount of spread between the two scales is out in the long end. So that's why you see that $15 million, most of the principal, being pushed down to the last 4 years, because that's where we have actually the least amount of variance between that loan and the municipal market issue. So we have a piece of the financing plan that is not prepayable for 7 years. We have a piece of the financing plan that is prepayable at any time. How did we come up with 45 and 15? So we also looked at the drawdown schedule that has been provided of how you may spend these funds over the life of the project. And we took that against what we know is required when we issue tax-exempt debt. And we broke this up in a way that we think gives you the best chance of meeting the spend-down requirements that the IRS requires of you. If you don't meet those spend-down requirements, any earnings you make above your cost of money or arbitrage earnings, you owe back to the IRS. We kind of want to avoid that. We'd like you to keep all of the earnings that you make, and I think it's tremendous that we're even talking about arbitrage right now, but because your debt is so short, the interest rate is so low, 2.55% is what the current estimate is on that $45 million, you have a good chance of exceeding that in your earnings on that money as it sits and is spent over the life of the project. So we came up with the 45 and the 15 to give you the best chance of hitting the spend down requirements by the IRS, given the preliminary drawdown, which we know is always subject to change, that we've received. The $15 million that would be issued potentially in 2020, by putting that in a different calendar year, that qualifies for what's called the small issuer exemption. So if you issue $15 million or less in a calendar year for facilities as a school district, you don't have those IRS requirements. So we're only going to have to watch the spend down of the $45 million. And again, we feel as though you will have a good chance of meeting the spend downs and being able to keep all of the earnings that you make on the proceeds as they sit through the life of the project. both of these interest rates, whether it be the 255 or the 271, are substantially below what we had as the referendum estimate. As the referendum estimate showed 2 phases of debt issuance at a 3.25% and a 3.5%. I think that may have been in your packet too. So as you look at that versus this option, it's about $900,000 less of interest cost. Obviously, no trouble hitting the tax impact that we talked about at referendum of 72 cents. So we feel good about this strategy, both from a phasing standpoint in terms of hitting spend down requirements, as well as giving you the flexibility to prepay debt. The next schedule, am I going too fast? Or not fast enough? The next schedule gives you an illustration of what that prepayment may look like. So that the 45 million looks exactly the same. The 15 million now, we said, well, what if 2 or 3 years from now, you say, well, we have an extra 5 cents to put on the levy. So our operating mill rate's going down. We'll put another 5 cents on that mill rate to start prepaying this debt. And by doing that, 5 cents for over the course of a 5-year period in this example, you would prepay $2,375,000 worth of that bank loan and start to create a ledge in the debt service. So without prepayments, your ledge is going to be when the debt gets paid off in 10 years. If you're able to prepay debt, we can start moving that ledge up. So in this illustration, we just start grabbing pieces of that bank loan to move the ledge up over a period of, in this case, 5 years of levying an additional 5 cents. And we're able to create a ledge in this example, 2027. So now you're 7 or 8 years away from a ledge instead of 10 years away from a ledge. But just illustrating how the prepayment could work, lower interest cost even more, and create some future flexibility.
And we just grabbed 5 cents.
We did.
I mean, the last 3 years, our tax rate has gone down, total tax rate. The 72 cents is calculated just on the Fund 30 tax rate. But when looking at this, it's the complete total tax rate. In the last 3 years, we've averaged a reduction in tax rate of 43 cents. So we think we have some potential there, but things happen over a decade, certainly. But we think that the interest rate difference between the loan will make up with that in prepayments easily. At least that's the theory, and I think it's pretty sound theory.
I agree.
Can you give us some idea of what the spend down requirements are?
Sure.
There's probably a whole bunch of
In
regulations.
general,
but
on the 45 million, which is not going to have that small issuer exception, the 45 million, in the first 6 months, you have to spend 10%. In the first 12 months, 45%. 18 months, 75%, and all of it in 2 years. Of those, I think the 6-month mark was the only one we were even concerned, 6 or 12 months, one of those. It was one of the early ones. And on the preliminary estimates, you're really close to being able to hit it with just the 45 million being issued this year. So if we were to bring all 60 to market as one issue this year, or even if we were to bring the bank loan this year, it wouldn't get the small issuer exemption, and I think we would miss spend downs, and we would owe the IRS any of those arbitrage earnings, which we estimated could be over $100,000 of earnings. That's a really rough estimate that you would owe the IRS, depending on what the cost of money ends up being.
So how we split up the projects between the 2 summers are important in what we do when. I mean, there's a practicality to driving that schedule, but
Yeah.
there's a financial practicality to
There is. It
also
would be
driving.
nice if you could, get things going this summer. That first 12 months, again, I think is the key here. And then I think it's no problem, the 18
Once you
and the
get into
24.
the renovations of the middle schools, those are large investments in comparison. The first 12 months, we're doing just the secure entrances basically at the elementary schools. A lot of schools, but just small scopes at some of them, very small scopes. So yeah, there's always 2 sides of this conversation. We have the architects and the construction managers on one side, and then we have this financial benchmarks that you're trying to hit that balance.
Yeah.
Would we ever prepay expenditures so that we meet our spend down requirements?
You could, we
Absolutely not.
definitely, we warn you.
I'm asking why, if we would.
We definitely warn you, depending on who you're working with for bond proceeds management, like, okay, guys, you're at that, let's try to get some invoices. Can your architect be billing? They want to try to spread out expenditures, but can we get expenditures in to hit these benchmarks that we need to hit?
I would agree with you, we wouldn't want to do that, but
But we'd have to follow the
asking.
rules.
It's, it's kind of, you want this happy medium between slowing up and speeding.
Sure.
Speeding up and slowing down, but,
thank you.
so,
So this is a federal deal, the spend down
correct.
thing. So their concern is that we're gonna take 45 million and stick it into something we're gonna make 6% on while we're paying these other people.
Yes.
That's the deal, right?
Or any sort of arbitrage, right? Yeah, it won't be that big of a variance, but yes, their concern is that you're issuing tax exempt debt, so you're getting that luxury,
Yep.
and then you're just sitting on it.
And so the money that we would have to pay the IRS is basically a fine.
Correct, for earning too much.
Yeah, because we don't pay taxes.
For earning too, exactly. It's for earning, it's a rebate calculation that you owe them. It's rare to be in an arbitrage situation with interest rates so low, but the short-term interest rates have gone up, and you're issuing such short debt. If you're issuing 20-year debt, you'd be over 3%, and we wouldn't hit that. So it's almost a nice problem to have. As long as we can get as long as we can do everything we can to avoid the rebate payment.
So then where do you put the money when you get that 45 million? Where's that money sitting? Making
Yeah.
interest, obviously, for us, or that's the fear from the feds. So where do you put that in?
So
What
the district is currently looking at firms to work through that process with you, so to manage the proceeds over time. But it's a very vanilla list of investments, state statute allowable investments that you would be putting it in, more than likely everything fully collateralized. So,
Pretty much CDs and money market,
Oh, is
and
that what we're
U.S.
looking at?
government
pretty
treasuries.
limited scope of options.
Yeah, CDs, treasuries, those types of things.
Yeah, we interviewed Friday, Thursday, and we hope to have a decision, because where the rates are, you do need someone to help you navigate and do the calculations on that arbitrage.
Right.
So just to give you an idea of kind of what we've analyzed, we've working with administration, looked at the phasing of it based on the spend down, looked at this mix of municipal market issue, bank loan, looked at the likelihood of using that prepayment flexibility. We think it's worth what you're spending for it. It's a very, it's not even a very wide spread between the municipal market issue and the bank loan. Other districts may levy additional dollars in Fund 39 and sit on them until the call date. For you, why not just, levy and pay off? It seems to me to be much more effective. So lastly, just the next steps. So you're discussing it here this evening, February 11th, and then I believe the board will take a look at it on Wednesday. Assuming you like the plan we just put forward, we would continue to work with administration on the offering document for that $45 million that would come to market this year. We have the rating call already scheduled with Standard & Poor's on February 21st. We then, in late February, early March, would just monitor market conditions. The district, via an RFP process, hired PMA as financial advisor, hired Robert W. Baird as underwriter. So they would actually be selling the bonds to investors. So we'd be working with them and looking at market conditions. And then we'd look at bringing you on March 13th final interest rates for your approval. So we would have everything done by that date. We would close on April 15th, and then design that. Again, you would be working with whomever you choose for that service, that investment portfolio, over the life of the project.
And then the timing of the loan, we know we want it in the next calendar year, but we'll be reading. The nice thing about a loan is you can turn that around a lot quicker than the bond process. We'll have to monitor interest rates, because obviously I'd like to push that back, because we're not paying interest on money we don't maybe need right away. But if interest rates are starting to move on us, we might move on January 15th or
Yeah.
whatever, so.
For this preliminary plan, we have that closing the end of January of 2020, so we're kind of showing it as the least amount of interest rate exposure, getting it done as quick as possible, but that can certainly go slower. You won't need those funds based on the drawdown, so we can kind of just keep our eye on that piece of it.
You listen well. At our previous meetings, we threw a bunch of stuff at you, letting you know that we want to be as aggressive as we possibly can, but obviously we have to still play within the rules and make smart decisions, and I like what you've presented.
Thank you.
Thank you for the analysis.
Yeah, we're excited about it. I think it's a really good plan. We get excited about this kind of stuff. I mean,
Well, I think interest rates are entirely unpredictable right now. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen over the next 6 to 12 months. I mean, the economy seems, so the investors are a little bit, you can see it in the stock market, the way it oscillates up and down. Interest rates will do the same thing. So if you wait, you run the risk of a much higher interest rate. And if you go too slow, I don't know. Seems like we should be more aggressive while the interest rates are still pretty low, right?
more aggressive than the 45 million?
No, I like
Oh.
I like the plan.
Yeah.
I'm not just that I don't think we shouldn't count on the interest rate staying this low
Yeah.
very much longer because,
No, when it comes to the loan, not to have those spend down requirements would be great on that $15 million. It would give us a lot of flexibility. But if things are really starting to move, we'll have everything ready to
Right,
bring documents forward to this committee and ultimately the board to close on that.
correct. Yeah, we don't have to go through the rating process or anything like that. We don't have to create a big offering document. That process will be really streamlined.
like a great plan.
Yeah, we think so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Because we can give her an extra 5
We
minutes.
got a couple minutes left for her?
Yeah, we got a couple minutes. You can have an extra 5. No other questions at all?
No.
Well,
Good.
thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. I'll leave this here.
Then call me tomorrow and remind me that you left it right there.
The next item on the agenda is recommendations for future committee meetings. Have we missed past recommendations that we haven't followed up on, or is there?
I think so.
Yeah.
Spot on.
The health insurance you had asked for, and we have that scheduled for March, so.
Just to talk about items that are listed under closed session. Land acquisition, we really don't have anything that we need to bring into closed session. School resource officer, we've decided to move that out till next meeting because there's a lot of information that we probably should have so we can have a more intelligent discussion on the topic. I mean, but you do have what is the proposed agreement in front of you to have until the next meeting. But we're going to get more information on that, and we don't need to decide that tonight. The Montessori agreement is the one we will be addressing tonight. We can go into closed session for that if any board members feel that we should go into closed session. If any board members feel if there is no will to go into closed session, I would suggest we just move into open session, but it's up to the committee members. If you feel like you need to discuss something in closed session, then make a motion to move the closed session.
Oh, yeah, we might.
Does the administration feel a need to be in closed session for these?
I would just recommend following the agenda, just so there's.
We're
no
following the agenda. You don't have to go into closed session. You can bypass closed session and go directly to open.
There's nothing, Bill's here from Montessori. We've been having an ongoing conversation, so I don't think there's any reason to go into closed session.
So then we will go directly to open session. We'll remain in open session. And under open session, we removed the approval of school resource officer agreement, and we're into the approval of the Montessori agreement. Mr. Clark.
Yeah, just a brief outline of our conversations and the slight changes that have occurred under this agreement. We've been under an agreement with Montessori for an enrollment agreement and a 4K agreement. There was always 2 agreements, so this one thing this document does is it merges those because our standard 4K, it was like following 2 sets of rules, and we just kind of merged it all into one for the ease of sharing information. The other thing that this document does, and there is a correction. Bill reminded me of our last phone conversation, and there's been many, so I appreciate his heads up. The reimbursement or the funding rate that they would get, I have in here, this document is 85% of the open enrollment or revenue limit amount per student. We actually agreed on 86%, so that's, but what that does is guarantee the district a 14% margin on the students attending Montessori school, but it also will allow us to, those reimbursement rates will move with our level of state funding. Before, we just had amounts in there. Not that we probably wouldn't be able to open up conversations again with Montessori, but this will allow it to float no matter what comes down the path. So again, a 14% margin per student, whether it's open enrollment or resident. We cleaned up some procedural type things with how to handle, especially those kids who come late in the summer. We sat down, Joe Cook and I, and the reps from Montessori, and kind of smoothed out some, hopefully answer all the questions, even though there's always another question to ask. How are we going to handle this kid? But maintaining that focus on our resident kids having, priority position in that selection process. The agreement also expands the grades that Montessori can operate up to 8th grade. We've been following through from the first group of kids that started in 5, we're following them through the elementary or lower level grades until they get to 8th grade. So that's just continuing what we've done in the past. So again, the things I'd like the most in this agreement is tying it to state funding, and it'll float so we don't have to re-enter into negotiations with them. So now Joe's here to answer anything on the instructional side, and Bill's here for questions you might have related to Montessori's program, and I can answer any financial questions you have. It's a 2-year agreement, and after that we can, with 12 months notice, we can opt out, or Montessori could opt out. So this would be our third arrangement with Montessori.
And from my review of the agreement as proposed, it reflects input that this committee has provided on reflective of our concerns. If anyone has. Mr. Como.
Yeah, the only thing I didn't see in the agreement, and I don't know if we really have to have it, I would probably ask administration if we think we would need this, is I didn't see anything where we could have access to the Montessori program at any time. Do we need that? Would we want that? And should that be in the agreement?
I'm trying to think if it is in here.
And if it is, maybe I missed it.
Yeah, I don't know if it is. I think it's a good
What do you mean
question.
by access, Mr. Como?
Well, I think that although, we're relying on their teachers and their program, I think we should have the ability to go and visit. I think we should have the ability to essentially stop in and virtually any time.
It's certainly a relationship we have.
I would assume if we approve this agreement that Montessori would make assurances that they'll send us a notice of an open invitation for our administration or school board members to visit their school with a reasonable amount of notice, right? Obviously, they don't want us just walking in every.
Well, yeah, and it's not necessarily just for school board, but administrative purposes.
Administration and school board, yeah.
Obviously we have access because we're providing certain services like the nursing services, right? There's certain services that essentially the school district is going to be providing that we're
Yeah,
listed
special
out
ed
here.
services will be
Special ed.
provided, so we'll be in the facility on a scheduled basis.
And I just was asking administration if we felt like we needed to have anything more in there. And if not, that's okay.
We have a pretty solid
asking out.
agreement or arrangement with Montessori, a good relationship, so I don't foresee that being a need, but
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Might be good just to put it in writing in a follow-up. It'd just be nice. And, my child went to Montessori in Buffalo, New York, many, many years ago, and it was an amazing experience, how you could make children put everything back in its place. I never learned how to do that with
And then
and turn it into an educational experience at the same time. So.
just one other question with respect to the resident student priority. Have we ever had any issues with that at all over the years?
Can't,
You want to, Joe, you want to? Just so our audience can hear what you're saying.
We have had some parents from outside of the district ask questions about it, want to know about how Waukesha students get preferred for this program. We've worked through that on an individual basis with those families. And a lot of what you find in this agreement as it pertains to entrance addresses some of the more recent concerns that we've had with outside of the district families.
To add to that, consolidating the two contracts into one, where we previously had a standalone 4K contract and then the 5K plus contract, streamlines our ability to be able to alleviate any of those kinds of questions by simply having one lottery once, where now we have two. That would be extremely helpful.
So it's gone smoothly.
Very.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I haven't heard anything. Nobody's called me, so that's a good a good thing. But I had to ask. And I think the rest of the contract, I like how we have streamlined it. I agree with you, Darren, in terms of how we're getting paid. Makes way more sense. Let's just do it on a percentage basis. So I don't have any other questions on the contract.
All I can say, when there's concerns about our, the cost of our, our two path system, the for choice schools and the public schools, I think this is a prime example of how you can make them work together, or have them work together, not make them work together, have them work together and both be successful, rather than having the state tell them how to do it. We came up with a solution that worked for Montessori and worked for the school district of Waukesha.
far as I
And
know,
we
it's
did that
still
without
one of a
anybody,
kind.
we did that without anybody telling us we had to do it. And it's, we really appreciate, Montessori is usually almost at every board meeting. They care about what's happening in our district, and that's a great thing. Mr.
I
Coleman.
actually pointed this program out to Senator Johnson when he was in town last year talking at Matheson Manufacturing, and invited him to kind of come and study, or at least see how we do it, see how we do choice here in Waukesha in general. Haven't been able to convince him to come here yet, but still working on that. So,
Thank you.
But hats off to you for all the effort that you put in, Bill and Michelle.
It's a joint effort. Started with Todd.
Okay, any other comments, questions on the proposed contract? Questions for our guests? Wonderful statements to make of any type? Mr. Coleman.
I'd move approval of the agreement as presented.
Second. Motion by Mr. Como, second by Mr. McCaffrey. Additional discussion. Questions, comments, criticisms? None?
None.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. With that, we have completed our agenda for tonight, and
ahead of schedule.
slightly ahead of schedule, so meeting adjourned.